increasing capabilities of air defense weapons, most aerial observation missions flown by Army aviation over enemy territory during the daytime will be flown at low level. This reduces the effectiveness of hostile radar. It further uses terrain features for cover, concealment, and surprise. During missions involving direct or visual observation, obvious difficulties are encountered. Visual observation is not easy at any altitude. At this level and speed, the problems are intensified. We will introduce the various techniques of visual observation and point out ways to develop skill in the practice of these techniques. Visual observation is not just sightseeing. What we are speaking of is the four-step process of detection of the target, identification of the object or activity, location of the target geographically, and finally, reporting the information gathered so that it can be made available to the commander. These are the goals of visual observation. To achieve these goals, certain techniques must be mastered. They are visual search, how to detect a target; target recognition, how to identify what you see; geographical orientation, how to locate yourself when you see a target; and finally, target location, how to pinpoint the target on your map so you can report its position properly. Visual search is the systematic coverage of a terrain area by eye to detect a target. There are a number of factors that influence this technique. Altitude is an influential factor. The higher you are, the further you can see, but details are not discernible. From 10,000 feet, you cover a lot of ground visually. Even at high speed, the terrain appears almost stationary. At 1,000 feet, your scope is reduced. The ground appears to speed up, but details are clearer. At 100 feet, the ground flashes past, but you can pick out even small objects. Aircraft speed has an effect too. At this speed, 250 knots, you can scan an area less thoroughly than you can from the same altitude at a speed of 50 knots. Type of terrain influences your ability to see a target. This open area makes this sighting easy. A sparsely wooded area increases the difficulty. Uneven terrain, accompanied by a heavily wooded area, proves even more difficult. Another factor in visual search is the seeing characteristics of the human eye. When the eye sees, the light from a wide angle of vision is collected by the lens of your eye and focused on the retina. However, only a limited portion of your retina, the fovea, as it is called, sees the image in sharp focus. Thus, you see sharp detail in only a small sector of your total area of vision. At 8 1/2 inches from your eye, this area of sharp vision is about as big as a penny, growing larger, of course, with distance. You will normally be able to see adequate detail for search purposes only within the foveal vision area. At 200 feet altitude, what area can you see with foveal vision at specific ranges? At 30 meters range, you see a circular area of approximately 6 meters. As range increases, your altitude becomes less significant and the ground pattern becomes elliptical. At 250 meters range, you normally see detail in a pattern of 75 by 21 meters. The pattern becomes more elliptical at greater ranges. At 500 meters, you can discern detail in the space of approximately 252 meters by 42 meters. You can see additional area without foveal vision, but not in enough detail for observation purposes. These factors influencing visual search are important. Since you have had sight all your life, you may think that visual searching is easy. An observer can fly over an area completely confident that he is seeing everything, and in fact sees little, although there is actually plenty there to see. It takes training to overcome this delusion of confidence and become aware that visual search is difficult and demanding. Another element that increases the difficulty is that the target you are looking for is often small and more often partially hidden or camouflaged. To surmount these difficulties, standard techniques and procedures have been worked out as a basis for instruction. They are derived from the factors that influence visual search. The observer can conduct visual search from one side of any type aircraft at a time. Two planes of vision are involved, the horizontal and the vertical. In the primary or horizontal plane, the observation work sector is divided into two portions, the orientation sector and the search sector. In relation to line of flight, the orientation sector covers the forward vision of the observer around to 45 degrees. You use this forward sector to orient yourself geographically, to see where you are and where you are going. Actual rotation of the head and eyes through the orientation sector should be practiced during training to establish the concept firmly in mind. The search sector is the rear area and comprises the remainder of the observation work sector. It will not extend beyond 90 degrees from the line of flight. It is in this area that you search the ground to detect targets. Let's consider the technique you will use in systematically scanning the search sector. At low altitude, you normally cover the terrain from 1,000 meters out to nearly below the aircraft. The ground close to the aircraft will appear to be passing more rapidly than at a distance. Because of this, the area from under the aircraft to 30 meters away is considered a non-observation area. For most effective search, you should begin your search at the outer limit, which we have found is normally 1,000 meters. Then, search in toward the aircraft. Next, you lift your vision out to 1/2 the distance to the outer limit, 500 meters. Search again, in towards the aircraft. Then lift your vision out to 1/4 of the distance, or 250 meters, and search in a third time toward the aircraft. Thus, the closer areas where terrain passes swiftly gets more repetition of search than the areas farthest from the aircraft. This three-step cycle is continuously repeated, out to the limit and in. Halfway out and in. And 1/4 of the way out and in. If you attempt to search an area with eye movement only, you will find the normal tendency for the eye is to jump from cleared area to cleared area. The search technique breaks down, and only the obvious or open areas are searched. By moving your head and not your eyes through the three-step cycle of the search pattern, you will systematically be covering the terrain as effectively as possible. Remember, eye and head movement is important. You will cover the terrain out to the side with the three-step up and down movement. Occasionally, you must also check forward in the orientation sector. And as you see targets, concentration will be divided since you must check your map, take notes, or report on the radio. To repeat, visual search is not easy. This basic technique is varied by the factors influencing visual search. The faster the aircraft speed, for instance, the more rapid your head movements. At low levels, your horizon is barely beyond your wingtips. Thus, your up and down or vertical search is minor, but your lateral or horizontal movement extreme. From high altitudes, you can conduct your search patterns with less movement, and you will be looking vertically or downward at a sharp angle. Type of terrain can also be influential. Over woods or jungle, little can be seen at a distance. By directing your vision downward, however, you can look between the trees and open up the area. But no matter how good an observer you are, you will never see everything. A well-trained observer will utilize every aid and clue and score a high percentage by overcoming enemy efforts at camouflage and concealment. One clue worth following up is smoke. It may be a brush fire started by artillery or rockets. It could also indicate an important target. Another clue that can be observed from a long distance is dust. Dust may indicate marching troops, vehicles, or even the blast of recoilless rifles. In this case, trucks. Observe this road. Here are tracks, no traffic, but follow the clue, a significant sighting. Is this area deserted? It appears so until the sun is reflected from something in the trees, perhaps a windshield. It's a clue worth tracking down. Our suspicions are correct. There are some other clues to visual observation that can improve your skill. You should usually try to observe with the sun behind you. Looking into the sun can be troublesome. Sometimes, of course, you have no alternative. Whenever possible, keep the sun behind you. Let's look at another detection problem. What do you see in this area? If you look carefully, you see a stack of wood camouflaging ammunition boxes. Here's another little test to prove a point. What do you see here, a fire? If that's all you saw, you're guilty of fixation or looking too long at the obvious. Let's go back and try again. Don't let the obvious break up your search pattern. What about the tank and the men at the edge of the field? So avoid fixation. Binoculars can serve you well as a handy aid, but a word of caution, use them sparingly and for brief looks. Searching through binoculars for prolonged periods will cause you to lose your orientation and may also give you vertigo and might cause air sickness. So much for visual search, the means by which you detect targets on the ground from an aircraft. This is just the first of the techniques you will have to master as a trained observer. After you have detected something, you must be able to tell what it is. Target recognition is the technique by which you achieve the goal of identification. As you detect possible targets, you must be able to recognize them rapidly. Prior to flight, You can learn a lot about target recognition from slides and aerial photographs. This is a good view of an M48 tank, but it is not the best picture for recognition training. This is how you are more likely to see the tank from the air. Training photographs and slides should emphasize the aerial view and show the equipment from various altitudes and under various degrees of concealment. It is not enough to report sighting tanks, artillery, or mortars. Model designations should be exact. Here is an 81 millimeter mortar. Not just a mortar, but an 81 millimeter mortar. 105 millimeter howitzer towed. Here is a Jeep. Not any Jeep, but a 106 millimeter recoilless rifle transporter. The distinction can be important. How about personnel? How many? There are 5 riflemen here. If the number is larger, you can count faster by twos. Check yourself this time by counting. How many men do you see? There are 12 riflemen. With even larger groups, try estimating. You won't have time to count. How many this time? There are 20 riflemen here. As your training advances, your speed of recognition will pick up. The faster you recognize a target, the less time you have to look at it, and the sooner you can return to your search pattern. Remember the importance of naming equipment, caliber of weapon, or number of men exactly. An essential test of your effectiveness as an aerial observer is your speed and precision of target recognition. Detecting a target and identifying it will not be of much help if you don't know where it is. Geographical orientation is knowing where you are when you sight the target, or orienting yourself relative to some terrain feature using a map, chart, or aerial photo. Let's examine some of the factors involved in geographical orientation. Remember, you use the forward or orientation sector of vision during this phase. Here is a prominent terrain feature. It happens to be Stone Mountain in Georgia. Finding this on the map should be easy, and it is. Let us look at the same mountain from a higher altitude. Not as obvious, is it? Vertical features are less apparent from above. Here is a road intersection from 1,000 feet. At this altitude, it should be easy to find on the map. And so it is. Since the area is fairly flat, the same intersection from 50 feet will be hard to identify. And it is. In low-level flight, vertical terrain features are good orientation aids. But in their absence, how could you locate this typical highway and railroad on your map? Just about impossible. But in practice, your problem should not be that difficult. You will normally be flying a path laid out in advance. You will know your flight direction and will have crossed previous checkpoints and noted the time. On the basis of time and heading, you should be somewhere in this area. There is only one intersection around. That must be the one you just passed. If you are correct, then you should now be approaching a town a little to your right. It is helpful to hold your map so that your flight path progresses straight up away from you, as though you were riding along the line. Thus, everything on the left of the flight path will be on your left as you face the direction of flight. Everything on the right of the flight path will be on your right as you face the direction of flight. Look for distinguishing features, the permanent features, such as road intersections. They pinpoint terrain locations for easy map reference. Using your map, locate your relative position and direction of approach. Check and orient the map against your view of the area. With study and practice, you can learn the technique of geographical orientation from the air. Even when you have detected a target, identified it, and established where you are, you must still locate the target on your map or photograph in order to report its position exactly. In a way, this calls for the use of all the other techniques of visual observation. On an observation mission, you are systematically covering the terrain in the search sector. You glance ahead to orient yourself. You are nearing an intersection as anticipated. You are on course and coming in from the proper direction. Oriented, you continue your search pattern. You spot a target, howitzers firing. Now you must locate this target on your map. Pinpoint the target on your map with a small circle and number the circle. You are not locating your own position, but the target position relative to the terrain. You have located this target accurately for reporting. Using the same number on your kneeboard recording sheet, you can write target information to include coordinates and pertinent descriptive information. Three 105mm howitzers firing to the east. If required, an immediate or spot report will be sent by radio. All this must be accomplished in a matter of seconds if you are not to miss other targets that may appear. The techniques of visual observation, detection, identification, location, and reporting require training and practice. When you have mastered these techniques, then you can take your place as a member of the Aviator Observer Team, the eyes of the commander over the battlefield.